Hello guys and welcome back to Paulo. In today's episode we're going to build a huge stadium. This is going to be accompanied by probably the biggest transport tram / bus hub we're going to have in the city. And it's going to look a little something like this. I didn't want to show too much of it there, but this is the spot where I think we should build it. So the first thing you've probably noticed from that little wee sneak peek was it was pretty grand. My thoughts with this are, maybe the stadium hosted the Olympics at some point in the past, or a football World Cup, and they were allocated a massive budget to do up the stadium and get it up to a certain standard. This, of course, gives me an opportunity to do something really wild within game and, I don't know, maybe something a little bit different. So obviously before we get to any of that, we're going to need the stadium. Because there really isn't one within game that would do this sort of thing justice, we're going to build our own. So we're going to start with the pitch. I'm going to use the better bulldozing mod to get rid of all of the stuff around the outside, like the little wee stands and stuff that come with it. And then 90% of this stadium build is going to be putting in our own modular stands. I go through a whole lot of different processes trying to find the right way to do it, and I change about a few times. But basically I'm trying to build a big stadium. Like, this needs to seat, well, in real life it would be around 100,000 people, but within game if I try that, the scale just looks way out. So I'm really just going to try and build it as big as I can without that scale blowing out. We're going with some nice yellow seats here, or yellow bleachers, because obviously, yellow's the colour for Brazil. And to get all these stands and seats in the right position, I need to raise up the second level of them, or the outside row of them. It's not perfect. Some of the fences and stuff are clipping through that lower section of seating, but I still think it looks pretty good. It passes the eye test. So now that I've sussed out that method, I'm going to extend that to all sides of the pitch, and then I'm going to experiment with putting up a third row of seats. I'd like this one to have a roof on it, but the trouble is that the roof looks silly because it's way short. It's only covering the very top section of seating, which doesn't look realistic. That roof should really extend right out to almost the edge of the pitch. So I'll hold off on that idea for now and move on to the corners. Some of the stands we get are curved or very slightly curved, so I'm going to try and work with those and make them fit in these corners basically. Unfortunately I can't get them to fit perfectly, but that's really my fault because I want these seats to go right up to the edge of the pitch. Had I have offset them back from the edge of the pitch, I could have got this curve to fit perfectly from edge to edge of the flat sections, but then that's also not really realistic because we get a lot of dead space between the stands and the edge of the grass. So even with the clipping, I think it comes out looking pretty good, and for now we'll just leave that roof section off and work with this. Now that the stadium's in place, we can put all the infrastructure we need in place for our transport hub. I'm going to extend out our tram line, and it's the same one that runs across that old aqueduct bridge. Eventually it'll basically just loop around the city. So I'd like to bring this line through before we do anything else, but before I do that I need to lower the ground here a little wee bit because I've decided to have the tram line coming through here below ground level. This will basically mean that the roading network and the pedestrian path networks through this area can just run unimpeded. There'll be no tram crossings or anything like that. So I'll use the terrain tool and go down about 12 to 15 meters in game, and then create some nice slopes on either side so it all looks nice and realistic. I'm going to split the line in two as we come through here, just so we can service different lines going different ways and have our ticket office, for instance, in between the lines. And then I'm going to put that roading network in. The bus is also going to have a dedicated line. I guess that's really the main aim here with the tram and the bus, is just to make them dedicated so that they're not fighting with each other, they're not fighting with regular traffic. I'm going to have some of the main roads going through this area so that they don't affect either the bus or the tram, and really just try and make it efficient. I've been struggling a little bit with getting my customized train and tram lines working within game. Like, the trains and trams run, but pedestrians aren't really using it, or not at all in some cases. So before I get carried away with any type of detailing, I want to get these lines in, and I really want to see pedestrians using it, because it's just a waste of time doing these areas if they're not going to be used within games. So get those basics right first and then move on from there. So at this point, we haven't done much detailing. I've just added some surface concrete down where the tram lines are, and I've changed the road on one side to a really nice looking retaining wall. This has given us this space to work with. If we can extend some sort of a concrete structure at that original ground height out and over the tram line, then we can still make use of the space that the tram line is running in. So rather than having like a super square dystopian looking nightmare, I've decided to try and soften the look with a nice curve. And before I can build any more of the structure, I really need to establish the very edge of it. Then I need to find a realistic way to make it look like the pedestrians are going up and through the ticket office with an elevator. I experimented with a few different things as per normal, but eventually I just settled for a really small building. It just looks super appropriate, saved a whole lot of props, and it also looks like it's cantilevering the entire structure up somewhat. Once all of that's in place, I can carry on finishing the rest of the concrete structure, and this is one tedious process. For instance, the marquee select for move it isn't working for me, so I've got to select all of these bits of concrete one at a time, and also every single one of them needs their height set manually. So I certainly do like giving myself a hell of a job at times, but my thinking with that whole Olympic budget was this should be really grand. Like, this has got to make a statement, man. There's going to be hundreds of millions of people that are going to see this, and hundreds of thousands that are going to use it, and some might consider this the home of football as well. I mean, on paper, Brazil are one of the best countries, if not the best country in the world, so their football stadiums really are going to make some sort of a cultural and architectural impact. And with enough time passing, they will become iconic, and that's the whole idea with this. So after placing what felt like a million pieces of concrete, I'm going to carry on now and get all of the bus lines and all of the infrastructure in place for that. I'm following exactly the same method that I did with the tram setup, and that was just to make sure it was all running before I got carried away with any detailing. There's a few hours detailing I put into this area, and I just don't want to waste any of that if none of it works. So again, just get it going and then go from there. So I let the game go for about a beer's worth, and then came back and checked it, and yep, everything was working pretty good. So that was a bit of a relief, and now I can carry on with the detailing, and it starts pretty monotonously really. I've got to get all of the pedestrian paths in first. And at this point, I wasn't very keen on using the invisible paths because I wasn't very good with them. Eventually I'll use them here, but you will see me go pretty deep with this usage of the vanilla one. Like, I do a lot of detailing around it and stuff, so I'd actually be interested to hear your guys' comments around whether you like it with what I do with the vanilla path, or whether you like the invisible one that we end up with at the end. Most of the detailing I'm going to do around these pedestrian paths is going to be like trees and really nice bushes. I'd like this to be a really green area. I mean, Brazil gets pretty hot, so we need some shade anyway, but again, we're making a bit of a statement, so the gardens here are going to be super nice. These pedestrian paths that I'm putting in here, they need to move people really efficiently between the tram and the bus and into the stadium. The idea is to also have them animate this pile of concrete that we've put in. One of the main things I'm going to do to hide that vanilla path is to put hedges in along where the handrails are, and I'm not trying to cover the handrail completely. I just want to make it look like we've had some foliage grow up and around where that handrail is. The next thing I want to try is probably the most tedious thing out of everything I do, and I want to make it look like there's some nice grass up here. Now, because it's all made of props, I can't use the surface painter up here. I can't even use decals. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to use the same hedge that we used around the handrail of the pedestrian path and sink it into the concrete a little wee bit and see if it can look like grass basically. I actually think this comes out looking really fantastic, but unfortunately, while I was doing this, I was unaware that I had not clicked the elevation lock button, and every single one of them fell to the ground, and there was hundreds of them, and it was a lot of work to put them in, and I was not doing that again. But looking back at this footage now, and for the brief moment that it did work, it looks really, really good. It looks like a natural extension of the grass within game. So you might have noticed too, we've added a little wee narrow road down here that comes through that concrete structure, and that's going to come to an employee car park that we're going to detail right now. This is our tram stop area. There's going to be a lot of car parks, there's going to be some maintenance sheds, there's a combination of nice looking areas and really rough looking areas. But I definitely think it comes out looking interesting. Like, I really like it. It's adding something different to the city. Now we need to extend all of our bus network out a little bit more, and that's going to start with the bus depot here. This is one large building, but it's pretty appropriate to put down next to the stuff we've already made for the bus. And to be fair, fits pretty well here too. Next, I want to whip around the city and set up some bus stops. I'm going to try and run these on non-main roads the best I can. Some of them need to, because they're going to go to like really touristy areas. But all of those lines are going to start at our little bus turnaround area we've made next to the tram stop, and all of them are going to serve their own little purpose. I want to make them all efficient. They get pretty popular pretty early on, so I'm hoping that's a sign that that's job done. So that was quite a lot easier than the old tram line to set up. So let's move on to detailing all of this area up. The first thing I want to do is get some pedestrian paths in here, so all pedestrians and citizens that are going to use this area, and hopefully it's lots, have got plenty of places to walk and access that public transport. Then we can finish this detailing off. So let's go back to the stadium now. There's going to be multiple entrances into the stadium, but I want to make like one main entrance. Of course, it's going to be over here right where our public transport is, so it's easy for people to get into the stadium, but I want to make this really, really grand looking. My thought for this area is there's a couple of different levels accessible by stairs. There's lots of shops and bars and sports memorabilia and museums and things like that around here, and I'd also like to have it offer a lot of space for people that may be waiting for a game, or it's half time, or they've come out to do a bit of shopping or whatever. I just want a bit of space around here. On a more technical level, you can see I've got a couple of small alleyways going into the stadium as well to get rid of a couple of pesky notifications, and I want to make it look like these are service roads that just run in underneath this concrete surface and maybe into some sort of a maintenance shed or a service area. I'm using that same piece of concrete we used for the big concrete structure over the tram stop to make all of these floor areas. One section's going to go up to a second level, and I've left another little cutout here in between these two road ones for a stairway to go up. This is another pretty tedious process, but I'm using the same piece of concrete and just offsetting it a little bit all the way up to make it look like realistic stairs, because I'm going to have invisible pedestrian paths coming up here eventually. To finish off the walls either side of the stairs and where the roads are, I'm going to use a white shipping container and just link them all together. This makes a pretty good look for a wall. I haven't really decided on what sort of facade I'm going to have on the majority of the stadium, but for this front section here, this really long storefront here with these white arches looks really good. So I'm going to use that and raise it up so it's a couple of levels high and just try and make it look like there's a really large section here for entry into the stadium. I'll use the better bulldozing mod to get rid of some of the advertising and stuff that's around on the front of it. But I think that looks pretty good. I might almost actually run that right around the whole stadium. I'm still not decided yet, we'll see what happens. So now I want to move on to some of the finer details, and the next thing appropriately is really a handrail around this second level to make it safe. There's going to be a lot of pedestrian movement up here. There are some really nice fences within game, these white concrete style ones, and they kind of look Mediterranean, Spanish, sort of the style that we're going for anyway. So I'm going to torture myself and put these all around the edge of this, then carry on putting things down like fountains and little garden areas. Maybe there's pergolas to show where the official entry is into the stadium. I'll also spend a little bit of time putting some roof props on some of these concrete surfaces we got up here to make them look like official roofs. Like I mentioned earlier, I can't add any surfaces up here, I can't add any decals or anything like that, but props snap up here really easy. I had an idea to use the surface painter within game to try and make like a football shaped paved area right out here in front of the stadium. I think it's really going to add to the flavour of the area, and it certainly goes with Brazilian culture, and well, it'll just look cool. Well, I think that looks pretty cool. And now you're going to see me rip it completely apart and try something different. I'm not sold on the green look, I've got to be honest, and I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments, but I'm going to try something a little bit different here. The whole setup of this just doesn't look right to me. Like, there's no nod here to the surrounding architecture, and there really should be. So I'm going to use more of those concrete props and really try and make this look like a sort of a coliseum. I want that type of a look for it. I wish we had some like realistic Roman style columns or some more detailed columns within game. That would be cool, but it looks a little bit brutalist with all the concrete, but I think it looks pretty cool. You'll see what I mean anyway, but someone mentioned in the comments from the last video that the transform tool could spin these concrete props on different axes that I thought we could. So I've flipped one up sideways to make it look like we've got these big columns. I'm going to add a few more along the tops of these as well to finish the look off, but like I mentioned, I'd really like to know from you guys which model of this you prefer. Before we finish up, we're going to add in all of the surrounding area, and we're pretty much just going to extend out what's naturally already there. So all those terracotta buildings are going to transition down into the grid pattern and eventually up to those more high-rise buildings down towards the structure we've just made. I've left a little bit of room for some favelas, and I want to show you guys why I haven't made them more realistically within game, like with real buildings and such. These are the smallest, most appropriate buildings within game to make those favelas, and you can see here that the scale is just, it's too large to make it look appropriate within game. It definitely looks pretty interesting, but compared to the favelas we made in the last episode, they just don't look anywhere near as good. So eventually I'll remove 99% of these buildings and just go back to that default method that I figured out in the last episode and put a big area of favelas in here. Rio Paulo is starting to get pretty large. It's starting to fill out here and it's looking really good. You can see that I've extended our little wee concrete arch that's flowing around that structure so that it links into one, and I think this looks a lot better. We've still got a little wee bit to do in terms of more detailing around some of the tram line and the roof on the stadium, probably also the facade as well, and I'd also like some suggestions from you guys for names for the stadium. But if you've enjoyed the episode, hit me a thumbs up and spread the word. It helps me a ton and I'm forever grateful. You guys are amazing. Look after yourselves and I'll see you on the next episode. Catch you later.